All right, let's see how the new 12-team playoff looks. There is some changes. Obviously, we know Texas went down. So what are some of these big changes? The first one is Oregon, obviously moving up to number one in the AP, number one in the playoffs, number one in our hearts with that duck. There you go, Oregon, number one. Two is Georgia. So Oregon moved up to one. Georgia went to two. There you go, looking pretty good. Miami State's at three, no change there. Iowa State at four. BYU is knocking right on those heels for that number 4 seeding. As far as how the rest of this goes, 5 through 12, Penn State is at 5. No change there. Ohio State, 6. No change there. Texas falls to 7. That's why those are kind of big deal games, right? Going from a 1 seed to a 7 seed. Ooh, that's a big deal, right? Because winning that conference championship game is a huge ranking determiner. Number 8, Tennessee, staying put, not really doing too much there. LSU at 9. There you go, LSU. As far as number 10, Clemson is 10, right there behind LSU in the AP. And as far as number 11, BYU squeaking in there. Notre Dame still on the outside looking in. BYU jumped them this week. So we have several other teams there looking to get into that last playoff spot at number 11. I say last because the 12th seed will be, well, that group of 5 slot. So Boise State right now still locked into that. But there's a lot of teams there looking to get in. BYU, this is the first time BYU is actually a team other than the Big Ten and SEC in that 5 through 11 slot. So as Iowa State and BYU have moved up throughout the year, they are now 2 teams from the Big 12 in the 12-team playoff. So there you go. That is how the current playoff bracket is now. Oh boy, we got some changes this week in the college football rankings. So we'll look at the 12-team playoff here in a bit. Or if you already just saw that, we're going to run through and kind of just talk about each team. Oregon with the big win over Purdue, but that's not the most important win they got. The win that they got this week was really just Texas losing. So they moved up to number 1. Oregon, though, rolled Purdue, so not really much to talk about there. Obviously, they got the big win last week against Ohio State. Georgia, big time win. So let's just go ahead and talk about Georgia and Texas now. Obviously, this was the marquee game of the week, the big one in Austin. Yes, my Longhorns went down, but that was not the most important part of the game. The most important part of the game was Jalen Walker had to come all the way into the roster to remember his name. I don't know why I had to struggle bust on remember this guy's name, but Jalen Walker, he absolutely dominated the game throughout when he was in. He was just basically harassing Texas offense the whole game. When he was in, Texas gave up or got 0 points, and when he was out, really kind of the first half or so of that third quarter, he had some issue. He went back to the locker room for something, but it wasn't a big deal. He came back into the game halfway through Texas' third drive in the third quarter, but the first 2 drives Texas had when he was not on the field, they got 15 points. When he comes, and Texas was moving in that third drive in the third quarter, and then all of a sudden, when he comes back in, like Texas, they ain't moving the ball no more. Kind of interesting. Jalen Walker had a great game. It was a crazy coming out party for him. It was the biggest stage, and the game was all about him. So yeah, I don't remember what Walker's stats were in the game, but I know he had like sacks, tackle for losses, fumble recoveries. He was doing work against Texas. Outside of him, he was probably the biggest takeaway of that game. The more shocking thing to me, I don't feel like Texas players got beat all that bad. That wasn't my takeaway from, Texas didn't look good. But to me, it was more of a scheme. Texas didn't make any adjustments. The one adjustments I guess they kind of made was Arch Manning coming in for the last 2 offensive series in the first half. Even still, the play calling and the scheme didn't change. He had 1 scramble, and then someone grabbed his face mask for a 15-yard penalty. Outside of that, it wasn't anything different from what Quinn Ewers was doing. But I was just surprised at how much the Texas offensive play calling and scheme, and they didn't try to do anything different. They just said, okay, we're going to drop you back and you're going to throw the ball. And they didn't try to roll pockets. They didn't try to do a little bit more of like a max protect, maybe leaving the running back or a tight end in to protect or anything like that. It was none of that. It was crazy. They just didn't make any changes. Georgia, then on the other hand, I mean, both teams gave up the ball. There was plenty of turnovers, and that was kind of one of the things that, you know, Texas turned the ball over or forced 2 takeaways from Georgia on their first 2 drives, and Texas had no points off of that. So that was something that was really kind of concerning, especially when one of those turnovers was on Georgia's side of the field and you got no points off of that. That was kind of my takeaway, at least a little bit more on the Texas side. Georgia, like, I wasn't too impressed with their offense. Like, the offensive, you know, from Georgia, Texas defense, seemed like it was an okay matchup. That wasn't really the main takeaway of the game. The main takeaway was Georgia's defense, and it was Walker. The defense, they didn't need to adjust their scheme and what they were trying to do defensively because Texas never changed offensively. So give major kudos to Georgia, the coaching staff. They did their homework. They knew what they were wanting to do coming into the game. They did that, and they didn't adjust. They didn't need to adjust because Texas didn't adjust. So there you go. I mean, they just, I don't even know if they called a different defensive play the whole game. Like, it just kind of seemed like it was the same defense every damn play because they didn't need to call anything different. Like, Texas wasn't doing anything different throughout the game to try to mix things up. You know, there was no, like, fun. I think there was one reverse type pass situation in the second or third drive for Texas, and the running back just kind of missed the ball right there in the middle field, which would have been a big gain. Just missed the catch. But yeah, I mean, Georgia's defense didn't really have to do anything different. I think those two teams are pretty evenly matched, but I want to see some better scheme play from Texas, like, you know, some kind of adjustments, because Georgia just didn't have to adjust. And so it was like we were in the defensive play. That basically worked the whole game. So, I mean, kudos to them. They came out. They put it on Texas. They really did. So Georgia gets that big dub, moves up to number 2 this week. Penn State, out of these at least top 5, maybe 6. I'm not sure about Miami, but out of these top 5, Penn State is definitely not in the same league. They really haven't played anybody, and they beat Illinois, okay, but they're going to play Ohio State here in a couple weeks. That'll be their big one. But Penn State was off. Ohio State was also off. Not really too much going on there. The last thing I'll say about the Texas-Georgia game was the call in the third quarter. And everybody knows about this call because it was so bad. So Georgia threw an interception, and the Texas guy returned it to about the 8-yard line or so. But there was a flag in the play. And they said it was pass interference. And at the same time, in the stadium, they play on the Jumbotron. I mean, obviously the call, right? The interaction between the receiver and cornerback. And you could clearly see, even when you saw it on TV, it was not pass interference. But when they're playing that video in the stadium and they make that call, and then fans start throwing things onto the field, and it just makes it look very weird and suspicious that they then huddle up. All the officials kind of huddle up. They overturned the call. It took them like a couple minutes to talk about. Like even the announcers were kind of just like, "What is going on here?" So then they come out and say, "Hey, you know what? That wasn't pass interference for picking up the flag. It was the right call." But you can't change that call because you already made the call. You already announced that what was the call was pass interference. If y'all would have got together and huddled before y'all made the original call and said, "Hey, you know what? We're picking up the flag. It wasn't pass interference." Okay, that's fine. You probably wouldn't have had chaos of people throwing, water bottles and different things on the field, but you can't overturn that call. Kirby Smart's right about that, but he's also not right that they were trying to get some calls over him. It's like, shut up, Kirby. It's fine. Okay, y'all working, my boys, but I'll agree with them. You can't overturn that. And that was exactly what I said as soon as they overturned. I was like, you can't overturn that. That just sets a very bad precedent, right? Because the next time some fan base doesn't like the call, they're just going to throw stuff on the field until you change it, right? I want to know what that officiating staff was thinking. I'd be really curious to see what kind of how the SEC kind of handles that one, because that wasn't right. And as far as the fans throwing stuff on the field, dude, you can't do that. Don't do that. Don't be a douchebag. And I get it. A lot of y'all are kids that are undisciplined, that have never been slapped in the face, and some of y'all should have been as kids. Anyways, Miami still undefeated. They escaped Louisville. Louisville was playing them tough into that fourth. That's about it. They escaped. It was a high-scoring game. It was going back and forth. Miami got it, though. They pulled it out. They went up 14 late and kind of midway through the fourth, and that was kind of when you knew that Miami kind of had it. Tennessee with the big dub on Alabama. Talk about Alabama in a sec, but Tennessee did pretty good, man. They did enough to win. I saw that they took down the goalpost. That was pretty cool. So I was trying to watch as much of this game as I possibly could, but I wasn't able to watch. I was kind of watching that and some others. I think that was more of a game about Alabama than anything. But Tennessee, you did what you needed to do to get the win. And there you go. You move it up number 7 now. LSU played Arkansas, and they took care of Arkansas the way they needed to. They won 34-10. Not much else to say there. They did what they needed to do. Clemson has continued to climb back into relevancy after the week 1 loss to Georgia, where Georgia basically manhandled them. Clemson continuing to impress. Probably will be there at the end of the year in some capacity as far as like competing for the ACC and possibly a 12-team playoff. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of things that still need to shake out, but I don't know if they're going to be like maybe a top 5 type seeding. I don't know if they're better than some of the teams above them right now, but I mean, they looking good, man. They're coming back. They're dialing things in. Iowa State, speaking of teams continuing to dial things in, had a sluggish game, got it figured out, got the win. They did drop 1 spot. Clemson kind of overtook them there, but you know, it is what it is. It's not just about glamour points, but just, you know, sometimes you got a sloppy game, just getting that W. That's what they did. They got that dub. BYU still hanging pretty good. They jumped over Notre Dame with their win. There you go, looking pretty good there from BYU as well. They had a kind of a scare there at Oklahoma State, but they were able to get it done there late in that game against Oklahoma State. Notre Dame played Georgia Tech, got the dub. Moving on. That's about it. I mean, that's all you need to really know. Probably one of the more shocking results of the weekend was Indiana hanging it on Nebraska. Like I did, a lot of people, myself included, did not think Nebraska was going to get slaughtered like that. But yeah, Indiana came out and worked them boys real bad. I think it was like 55-7. So yeah, Indiana, definitely not saying that they're winning the Big Ten, but looking pretty good. They just play mistake-free football. And I'm really looking forward to when they actually play a really good team. Probably not going to be until they play Ohio State, second last game of their calendar, that we can see really how well this Indiana team is going to measure up. Texas A&M had not exactly a scare per se, but definitely didn't put away Mississippi State. They did play Mississippi State. Didn't play Mississippi State all that well. They got the win. My aunt, who's a huge fan, I talked to her after every A&M game, which had to be kind of quick because my Longhorns were playing. But she wasn't impressed. I wasn't really impressed either. And I mean, she watched more of it than I did. I was kind of watching this one in the Alabama-Tennessee game. She was just like, yeah, Wegman went back to his old ways. So that was kind of the thing that we were kind of talking about. We wanted to see Wigman, the quarterback for A&M, do better multiple weeks. Do like what he did last week, multiple weeks. Because like he hadn't shown what he showed last week ever, really. And so it's kind of like Wegman went back to his old ways of not really being impressive. But they got the win. Moving on. Alabama. Okay, Alabama. So I know I talked about Tennessee a little bit. So Tennessee got that win over Alabama. But Alabama, outside of 2 quarters, the first 2 quarters against the Georgia game, Alabama is a very, very mediocre team. And I mean very mediocre team. Are they a top 25 team? Yes. But this is about where they should be. Somewhere in the mid-teens area. That is Alabama. They are not a top 12 team. They are not a playoff team. Alabama should not make the playoffs. I mean, the rest of their schedule, maybe, if they can get by. Obviously, if you lose to Missouri, and more on Missouri coming, but if you lose to Missouri, that won't be good. But LSU, I mean, I'm going to have to take LSU in that game because LSU's kind of figured things out from that USC loss to kind of start the year. But Alabama, man, very mediocre. I don't know what's going on there. it seems like they're trying to make Jalen Milroe too much of a pocket passer instead of like dual threat. What he does very well. He's like one of the biggest guys on the field. Use him that way. Now I'm not saying just run him into like D linemen and linebackers, but you can get him against some secondary players. That dude can take him on pretty easy. Kansas State did not watch this game, but they played West Virginia, and yeah, it doesn't even look like it was much of a contest. Yeah, there you go. Kansas State just kind of came out and worked the Mountaineer boys 45-18. Ooh, Pat McAfee probably not liking that one. But anyways, Kansas State not getting a huge win. Not much is going on there with West Virginia, but I mean, get those easy wins when you get them. Boise State was off this weekend, did not play. They did drop a little bit, mostly because other teams won, but they didn't do anything. So yeah, they dropped a little bit. Not really a big deal. They're probably just mostly playing for winning the Mountain West Conference, and then obviously the 12-team playoff, the 12th spot. So that's what they're playing for right now. They're kind of locked into that. So there you go. Boise State, as long as you keep doing what you're doing, probably be there in the playoffs. So Ole Miss was also off this week. Did not play. There you go. Pittsburgh was also off this week. Illinois Fighting Illini. Played Michigan. They beat Michigan 21-7. It wasn't like a resounding, dominating victory. Michigan has some major problems. I think mostly Michigan just they've changed things up too much throughout the year to say that they're a credible team. Like a lot of teams, that's not what you want to do, right? You don't want to be changing things up. Obviously, you need to change things up, change them up, but they've started out the year kind of changed things up pretty early, and then they've just continued to change things, especially around the quarterback position. So it doesn't build team chemistry. And for Michigan, as you play teams that know who they are, Illinois knows who they are, right? So Illinois had no problem putting away Michigan. Michigan just can't do much offensively. Yeah, there you go. Illinois is looking pretty good. Still being competitive there in the Big Ten. Missouri played Auburn. Did not impress at all. They kind of had a late little comeback to kind of get past Auburn. And Missouri is just not a good team. They are not a good team. That's about all I'll say. Missouri's just not a good team. They're beating the teams that they need to beat, and that's about all I'll say. SMU played Stanford, had no problem whooping up them Stanford Christmas trees. So there you go. SMU moving on. Army and Navy. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to now watching Army and Navy at the end of the year. There's not too many teams in the way between now and then. Obviously, Army will have that Notre Dame game, so that'll be an interesting one. And then obviously we'll have Navy at the end of the year. You want to say and talk about how good a team possibly is. Oh, Navy plays Notre Dame this weekend. So Navy gets Notre Dame this weekend. So Notre Dame playing the two undefeated service academies coming up here over the next few weeks. So they're going to get Navy this weekend there for Notre Dame, and then Army here in like 3-4 weeks. Ooh, interesting. So yeah, Notre Dame, if Army Navy get that win over Notre Dame, that'll be a big deal. So yeah, if Army or Navy can get that would be a huge win for the service academies if they can get that win over Notre Dame. Number 12 currently, Notre Dame. Probably will be watching that Notre Dame Navy game. Absolutely. And we've all petitioned. We have now all been listened to. Vanderbilt is ranked. What's crazy is Alabama with 2 losses, who lost to Vanderbilt, is ranked 15. Vanderbilt ranked 25. What is that? Alabama, Vandy, they need to switch, man. They need to switch. It's crazy. Awesome for Vandy. Glad they're ranked. They've done pretty impressive work. Will they finish the season with 2 losses? I don't know. I'm not putting money on it. They're going to have my Texas Longhorns coming into town this week. Good luck. I'd imagine Texas comes out with a little bit more fire this week. And there you go. As far as how they're going to end out the year, they're going to have LSU and Tennessee. That's pretty tough. That's a pretty tough stretch. Here's this next 5 games. They're going to get 3 teams in the top 10. I'm glad they at least got ranked now because they probably not going to be ranked going forward. And the last thing I'll say about Texas is I'm actually kind of glad they lost because, oh my gosh, to talk about Texas has been nothing like they are on the silver platter. It's like, dude, don't talk about my Longhorns like that, okay? Like, I like to talk about my Longhorns like that and all, and I get it. We're all fans and we like our teams to do well, but it's like, oh my gosh, this is too much. This is too much. So honestly, I'm glad that they had that competition, they had that challenge to find out what your defects are. You know, Georgia had that against Alabama.